Yes, people, welcome back to the podcast. You've got a very ill host today, so apologies if my voice sounds a bit croaky or I keep coughing. I'm just not feeling very well, to be honest. I've not really felt well for the past couple of weeks, but I've got a really interesting episode for you today, and we're going to be talking about the dark side of human nature. And I will go into discussions about the evil in society and historical figures that have put evil out into the world and where I think that evil truly resides from. But mostly, I want to talk about how evil resides within the individual and how becoming aware of the evil within us and becoming aware of the characteristics and the part of ourselves that we suppress and don't fit in with the personas ideas of who we are, how becoming aware of them and integrating them into our personality and accepting them can actually make us free of them and can actually give us extra energy to start putting good out into the world and not mindlessly acting evil out. And I think that's where I want to start, to be honest. I'd rather start, instead of looking external and blaming things out there and abstracting ideas of evil and how demonic forces are around the world and the world's going to end, people are so evil. I think I'd rather start within our individual capabilities. And Jordan Peterson always said a really interesting quote. He was like, stop criticizing the world until you have your life in order, until you have your room in order. He used the word room. And he's like, sort out what you can first before you start looking out there and start criticizing things and criticizing people and having this doom and gloom skepticism about the world. It's like, look at within your mind and sort out the clutter there first. Become aware of the clutter, unravel some of the clutter, and you'll find within that a more natural breath of optimism can really emerge. And I also think when people have this real cynical nature about things and so that they're always thinking that the world's going to end or society's against them, it's because they haven't got their life in order. They haven't got themselves anchored and they're not aware of the fact that what is happening out there actually resides within them as well. And they are a participant as much as anyone else. The people that often idealize themselves and think they're the good in the world and criticize all the evil are actually just as much evil as the people that are blatantly out there doing evil. They're just not integrate. They've not become aware of it. They're just acting out unconsciously. It's so suppressed in the back of their minds that their ego ideal, their idea of who they think they are is so against it that they actually just completely shut off when they do these acts, and they act out mindlessly in a kind of a state of possession. They act like they're being possessed by things, and they put evil out into the world. So always be careful of anyone who thinks and says that they're doing these things right and they're doing everything right and they're criticizing the world, because when you come from that place of grandiosity where you think you're greater than people, it blocks you off to a lot of your own evil tendencies. And what I said, like any action that a human can do, any human is capable of doing that. So when you look at Hitler, you look at a Stalin, you look at, I don't know, someone that you in your life is really depressive and angry and miserable and it's just causing chaos. You are just as much capable as they are of doing that. And there is probably parts in your life where you have that sort of tyrannical nature or that depressive nature. And we've got this funny idea of projecting things on other people, projecting what lies within us on other people. But I'm just going down a rabbit hole now. It's very easy to do in these podcasts. So I think we should start within what is actually, how do we understand what the dark side of our own nature is? I'm going to call it the shadow. And I want to explain what shadow work is, because this is going to be a podcast mainly about shadow work, and what even is shadow work, why is it called shadow work, and what is the benefits of it. So if you read Depth Psychology, which comes from Carl Jung, he has a concept called the shadow. And the importance of this is that anything that lies within the shadow is outside of awareness. Okay, so when we do shadow work, it's bringing in unconscious materials that we're suppressing that's outside of awareness and bringing it into our awareness. So it's all about becoming aware of the patterns and behaviors and thoughts and emotions and energy clusters that are going on outside of our awareness. And why things sit outside of our awareness is because when we are born, we are kind of just like blank slate. There's not really a sense of self. But as we grow up in the world, we start learning the motor skills of how to move our arms and how to use our body language to get drinks and speak to your mum and look for attention and love. You start learning patterns and you start learning behaviors and mechanisms of how to fit into the world. And through this adaptation process of learning how to survive in the external world, you build up a sense of self. And this sense of self is it works very conditionally. It figures it out through the external world. It's like, oh, if I do this, I get attention from my mum. I'm really hungry and I cry. Oh, mum gives me food. And then as the developmental process goes of you becoming older ages, so from baby to toddler to young kid, whatever, and then you go to a teenager, you learn more about the world and how to survive in the world. And what is right and what is wrong, what is deemed morally right and morally wrong, what society, what you need to be to fit into the school system, what you need to have friends, how you need to behave and act, what it is to grow up in society. You learn all these things, and so you condition a personality by learning the rules of the external world. So what happens is, because every human is capable of any experience of a human that can have, there's not one human that doesn't have depression as an experience. There's not one human that doesn't have an excitement as an experience. We've all got these emotions built into our DNA. And what happens is, because we grow up in a society and we grow up as we grow up, I feel like I'm just repeating the same words over and over again. Sorry guys, my mind's not like extremely sharp today. But as we grow up and as we get older, we refine that more. We really learn how to fit into a role, and this sense of self gets stronger, and you get this idea of, oh, okay, I'm Alex Rogers, and when I do this, I get attention, and when I've noticed that when I act like this, people don't look at it favorably, or I don't get attention from this, I don't get attention from that, and you start learning the rules of what it is to be you, a sense of self, and what it is to get attention and love. So anything that contradicts these ideas, or these ego's ideas of how to fit into the world, your mind, your ego instantly wants to hide them away, wants to push them away, because it understands that when you get angry out in the world, when you don't get something you want and you start throwing a fit or a tantrum, maybe when you start bragging and thinking you're really cool and you're constantly being self-centered, you get evidence from the external world so that them sort of characteristics don't get mirrored, they don't get matched by people. People look at them unfavorably. So what happens then is your ego awareness, so we're going to use pretty much ego as awareness right now, right? What you're conscious of will go, okay, that doesn't fit in with my ideal. It doesn't fit in with who I want to be or who fits into the world. So I will throw that away. I'll bat it away to some part of my mind, into the back of the mind. And so you start learning to suppress things. So a common emotion that gets suppressed in our society is anger. Like you are an angry person, and you start to realize that when you get angry, people look at you very weird. They're like, oh, he doesn't have emotional control, or you can't be angry in this society. So you start to learn that anger is negative. It's a negative thing. So you start throwing it into the back of your mind, and you create the ego creates barriers there to stop you from feeling anger. So you're not aware of the anger that resides within you. You just never feel angry because it doesn't get mirrored out into the world. It's not something that's okay. Same with and it can be different for different people's cultures, and different cultures like different things and they value different things. And there could be parts of you that you grow up in a family that doesn't want to see you succeed, that your family might have never done well academically, might have never done well for itself, their lives might be chaotic, and it could be that they look down upon anyone who does things well. And so now you've learned through the adaptation process of living with your family that it's a bad thing to do well. Like, then people are so narcissistic and think they're so much better than everyone else, and so you suppress parts of you that want to take responsibility and want to be structured and routinely. It can be whatever it is, right? You start to learn how to fit into your family structure, your society, your school system, whatever it is, and you suppress whatever doesn't fit in with the ego's ideals of what it is to fit in. And so anything that gets suppressed away, anything that contradicts the ego's ideals of who it thinks it is then lies in the back of your mind. And this is called the shadow. And as you can tell, it's called the shadow because it sits in the darkness. If the ego's awareness is like a light, it's a light that shines on things. it shines on the things that it wants to fit in with them. And that light, what resides outside of that light is the shadow. It's the unconscious material that you're suppressing. And what happens when these things get thrown into the unconscious, when they get suppressed into the unconscious, is they don't disappear. You can't just say no to anger and never be angry again. It's built into the human DNA. It's an archetypal pattern of energy. It's a common theme that people are angry. It's built into the human DNA. So what happens is when you suppress things, they don't disappear, but they just get like depressed. They get put down deeper and deeper and deeper. But the deeper things go, the more repressed things get, the more energy they build, because the more energy you're giving to them by repressing them, you're paying a subtle form of attention to them. And the more they're repressed, the more energy they have. And so this energy then builds up within your minds, and they are called complexes. And it's a cluster of energy that's been repressed. And when they get powerful enough, they literally have the power to overcome your ego awareness and act themselves out into the world. And you can see complexes as encapsulated as mini personalities. So there might be a part of you that is really arrogant and thinks he's the boss and I do things really well. And because your society or your family have always looked down upon people who act like that, you've suppressed it so much, but it's become like a fragmented personality within your mind. Instead of being integrated into your ego awareness, that like thing that grandiosity that resides within all of us, it's multiplicated. It's kind of like pulled away from your ego awareness, been fragmented from the center, from the core of the awareness, and now it's living its own life with its own ideas of what it wants, with its own goals, with its own desires, and it's living its own life. And at all times, it's trying to overtake your ego awareness. And of times of mindlessness, of times when you're not aware, what will happen is these complexes can like kind of push the ego away, and they can possess you, they can overtake you, and you can be acting out a complex about actually knowing you're doing it. And this is how you can often do things that is self-sabotaging, or do things that are not aligned with who you are. Have you ever just like been in a conversation with someone and said like a really nasty comment, or just said something really stupid? Or have you ever like done something that's so stupid that you don't know why you did it, and you feel like it wasn't you that made that choice? Often like people who have addictions, they'll chase the thing that is destroying their life, and when they describe it, it's like I feel possessed by something. I feel like something has overtook my awareness and I don't have control. And it's because that level of control is your ego awareness. And because you're not aware of the tendency of you to seek the self-sabotaging, the tendency of you to be arrogant and grandiose, it is now living as an autonomous being within your mind, and it's got free reign. And the more you repress it, the stronger it gets. So the whole point of shadow work is trying to get the parts of you that you don't want to look at, the parts of you that you really don't think are you, and trying to integrate them into your awareness, become aware of them and accept them. And this doesn't mean they go. This doesn't mean then parts of you just disappear, but it just means instead of being fragmented and split off so they can't communicate, it means your ego awareness can then like hold a container and watch them all and help them all. And you can have more control over them because you become aware of them. You can't make them disappear, but you can gain more control. So how do we do this? How do we do shadow work? How do we go into the repressed parts of our mind and the repressed parts of our body and become aware of these complexes, these subpersonalities, like become aware of the parts of us that don't fit in with our ego ideal? How do we bring them into awareness and integrate them into our personality? And I suppose that's the work that I'm trying to do right now. Sorry guys, I just need to get a drink of water. I suppose that this is the work that I'm trying to do right now. It's a lot of my reading and a lot of my understanding of like psychological materials, a lot of shadow work recently. It's all trying to be humble enough to look at my shortcomings, humble enough to look at my judgments and my projections on what I think other people are, and flip that perception back on myself and realize, where are these things coming from? And I can give you a practical example of something that I've done recently that I'm still trying to deal with, and I'm having a real tough time with it, because It's difficult accepting and finding your own flaws, but once you free up the negative parts, there is a lot in there's a lot of accepting your flaws that then frees up a lot of positive ideals as well. What is negative also has positive attached to it. We've got the polarity of emotion. So if you can free up your grandiosity, if you can free up your narcissism, if you can become aware of that, you might actually free up some positive emotions with that, which is like compassion and love and empathy and a sense of purpose. So in my life right now, sorry, I just got completely off track again. But in my life, I've noticed that, well, I'm going to go on a tangent and tell you the story. So I did a psychedelic trip with my friend Ross. This was a year ago. Yeah, and we had a crazy experience. And I'm not sure if I've talked about it too much in this podcast because I still don't feel too comfortable really diving into it. But we got to the point where, and this is going to sound completely ridiculous to people that are listening, but I just encourage you to have an open mind, because I'm really speaking from this authentic, truthful place of this was my experience when I went through this. This wasn't I was taking a hallucinogenic, but I experienced this. I seen what was happening, and if you can't believe that this happened, then that's fine. I'm not trying to change anyone's beliefs, but this is what happened. This is what I experienced. So me and my mate Ross were sat there, and all of a sudden, I started noticing that I could hear his thoughts. So I could hear everything. Like, we was communicating through our minds, and we wasn't talking to each other. We was having a back and forth dialogue through our minds, and I could hear what was going on in his mind. I could feel what it was like to be him, and he could feel what it was like to be me. And we it's like we got this ability to flip our consciousness into each other and to observe the mechanics of our minds and kind of help each other through our problems. And I might do another video talking about this when I feel more comfortable with it. But we got to a point where Ross was giving me some advice on something, and like, in my mind, I just completely like shut off because I thought I knew more than him. And as soon as I did that, I had a thought come from him, which was, stop doing that. You do this all the time. Like, you think you know more than people and you just shut them off. And I was like, wow, I do actually do that. I do that a lot. I think I'm a lot more intelligent than people, or I think I know more than people. And sometimes in conversations, I can just switch off because I think that they don't know as much as me. And it can kind of be like, well, yeah, whatever. I'll just get back onto what I want to talk about in a minute because they don't know what they're talking about. And so being very close-minded and thinking that, like, egotistical in the way that I think I know everything. And I remember that was just one thing that happened in the trip, and like it was interesting at the time. But as I started, the year went on and I started doing more shadow work, I started to realise that I really do think that I know more than other people. I really do think that I have more answers, or I'm special, or I'm different compared to people. And I've got this real sense of, like, I think I know more. I think I'm better than people. And this has been so suppressed out of my awareness because in my family and in the society we live in, it's been promoted to be very humble. It's been promoted to be very, like, to get people to like you, and people don't often like people who think they're better than them. So I've suppressed this part of my personality for so long that thinks it's better than people, and it's been subconsciously, like, dictating a lot of my interactions with people and a lot of ways that I learn, taking information and learn things and try things. It's made me very pessimistic about other people's opinions and very, like, just not willing to listen to people. And this has been a pattern that I've done for my whole, I would say, the last 15 years, is I've just not listened to people. I've always felt like I know more than people, and when I actually when I don't really, but there's a part of me that thinks it knows more and it's better than people. And this is, like, perpetuated throughout my life, and I've gone throughout my life just thinking that, yeah, like, I'm not going to listen to that person, I'm not going to listen to this, thinking that I have all the answers. And I've just started slowly unraveling that and becoming aware of it. And now when I'm in conversations with people, when I'm going through my life and I get, like, a bit of information comes in that conflicts against my ego's ideal, I'm starting to notice this instant process to switch off and just think, nah, that's not right. No, they don't know what they're talking about. I know more than them. Oh yeah, I'm smarter than them. Oh nah, they don't know what I know. And this is a part of me that does this, but I've never been able to look at it correctly and never been able to accept it, because it always went against my ego's ideal of being humble, my ego's ideal of being acceptant of others and to get people to like me, and my ego's ideal to fit in. It goes so against that I've just had it suppressed in my mind and not been aware of it. But now I've had the humility and I've had the humbleness to accept it, and I've become aware of it, and I'm trying to integrate it into my awareness. I'm starting to notice it more, and I can actually, when that voice comes up, when that pattern comes up of not listening to people, or not listening to, or not taking in the right information and thinking I have all the answers, I can stop, get away from it, take a step back, and actually deconstruct that and think, oh no, do I actually know the answers here, or am I just being judgmental, or am I just being grandiose again in my own intellect, and I can start breaking it down. And the more I'm becoming aware of it, the more I'm pulling myself away from it, and I'm integrating it into a whole. I'm integrating it back into my personality. And now I can notice it when it rises. I can accept it. I can use it as a bit of self-confidence, because sometimes I think it is good to think that you are good and you have self-belief and you think you're right. It's good to have that self-confidence sometimes, but I can notice it when it comes self-destructive now, and I can detach away from it. And because I'm aware of it, it doesn't possess me. I can kind of push it to the side, not suppress it, but I can notice it, accept it, and move on and act in a way which is more integrated. But if I was to continue to just flat out ignore this, if I was continuing to just suppress this part of me that does this, then I would never overcome it. It would just be this complex, this cluster of energy that just has so much power that it just overtakes my awareness, and it blinds me to the external world. And one thing you tend to do is you tend to project what you suppress onto other people. So one of my biggest hates is people that think they know everything. Is one of the strongest things that I really hate in a person, that and hate's a strong word, but I do, I really despise in a person, is when someone thinks they know it all and they come across really cocky and arrogant. I really have a strong feeling towards that I dislike it. And I find that really interesting, how that thing that I have a really strong feeling to dislike is something that resides within me. And what I did was I refused to accept that was part of me, that feeling to think you're better than people and think you know everything. I neglected the fact that was me, and then I projected it onto other people. I'd look at people and go, oh, I hate them when they do that. Oh, that person thinks he's so cool, he thinks he knows everything. And instead of dealing with it myself, because it was so hard for my ego ideal to accept that, I just pushed it onto other people, and I was like, oh, everyone out there is the issue. They all think they're so much better than people. And that's how you project your inner insecurities onto people, and the inner things that sit within your mind. And a lot of shadow work can be done through looking at your projections onto the world. How do you perceive things? How do you perceive people? What don't you like in people? What do you dislike about that person's relationship, or that person's finances, or that person's character? What you project onto people is often a mere reflection of what you dislike about yourself, and you're just not aware of. And so there's one real practical tip of how to start doing this shadow work, is start looking at the people that really aggravate you, or start looking at the people that really give you a strong emotional response, and start deconstructing that to see how you actually embody the characteristics that you dislike. I do a lot of journaling for this process. So that story that I told you, I'm sat down recently, and I'm starting journaling about situations where I think I know more than people, and dialoguing with that part, that sub-personality, that complex of where did it come from? Why does it think it's better than people? How can I help that be integrated into my personality? A lot of meditation, sitting with it. And these are ways you can do shadow work. You can just observe in your life how things and situations elicit that response, and when that response of you thinking you know more than people, or that shadow response arises, understanding where did that come from, why did it come from in that context, and just doing a lot of inner work is really essential here. And that what I first said, that projection is fascinating. It's a really interesting little trick our mind plays on us, is whatever we hate about ourselves, whatever we have a strong dislike towards, we project that onto other people instead of accepting that resides within us. And you can do this on a real multifaceted level. You can look at the external world out there, and you can notice how you hate a football team, or you had this real strong feeling against a group of people and a certain type of ethnicity, a certain type of I don't know, a certain type of person, and you notice how you like categorize them, and you judge them on these ideas. And it's like, why do you hate them people so much? Why do you have this idea about a certain type of religion, or a certain type of football team, or a certain type of race or ethnicity, a certain type of sex? Like, what is it that you really despise about them? And is it the thing that you despise about them actually resides within you, and you're too scared, or you're too cautious to actually deal with that, so you just project it out externally? Because what can't be accepted internally has to find its release somewhere, and so it gets its release on the projections on the external world. So yeah, really, that's another really interesting point that I completely forgot about, which I probably should have covered before, which is like, check your projections. It's incredibly important, guys. And like, there's power that comes from accepting evil. I remember Jordan Peterson saying, it was a really interesting quote. I love Peterson. He's a very interesting intellect, a very interesting person. And I remember him saying that you'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And you want to come to accept the warrior's mindset, and whatever the warrior has to do, the evil he must embody to do the right thing. You must be able to accept that, and you want to live into society with the acceptance of all the parts of you, all the negative parts, all the perceived evil parts. You want to be able to realize that they are part of you. And when you realize that they are part of you, that you are capable of all these things, and you come to accept them, and by the acceptance, you build up power with them. And you can use their energy in good ways. You can use that, like, there's a lot of energy that comes from anger. There's a lot of energy that comes from hatred towards people. There's a lot of it, like anger. There's a lot of energy that comes from any negative, what we perceive as negative emotion. There's so much energy attached to there. And when you suppress it, you kind of like, the energy comes out in fragmented ways, and it comes out in subconscious actions. But when you can accept the part of you that you really dislike, you have that free flow of energy. Now you can use it in a way that is productive towards you and actually helps you. And like, the more you suppress something, the more that energy gets split and fragmented, and it starts going off in this way and that way, and doing this and doing that, and it feels like you can't gain control. But when you have that level of acceptance and awareness, like, the energy can emerge from hatreds towards a certain person, or that grandiose effect of thinking you know more than people, and you can like sit there and embody that energy and use it in the right way, because you can feel what it feels like to be that evil, to be that negative emotion, whatever it is. You can accept that, and you can use the energy for good. And it's the process of alchemy. It's the process of turning something negative into something positive. But you first have to accept the negative. You first have to be able to sit with it and feel what you need to feel, to then flip it towards using it in a conscious manner. And the whole process of shadow work is building up that ego awareness. We often think of the ego as something very negative. We think of the ego as something that is Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. We think of it as something that like gets us in trouble. But in reality, like, the ego is used to fit into the world, and it's used to make us act in the world, and to be aware of things, and to like and to do your job roles and do the things that you want to do. And what you want to do is actually like grow your ego larger with awareness, so it can be more incorporated with every part of your psyche. Like, if your ego is if your ego is small, it's very limited in what it can do. And so it has really strong barriers on it. Sorry, guys. It must be horrible listening when I'm coughing all the time. So let's see, like, the psyche is this, right? So you've got this massive, like, oval, which is consciousness. We'll say yourself, the soul, whatever it is, the consciousness that, like, makes you aware. That is in this massive oval. That's everything. And within the center of this oval is another circle, which is your ego. And it's in a circle, right? So it's got a barrier all around it. And what happens is, like, if your ego is very small, and if your ego is very limited, and it has just these small ideas of who it is, it blocks off any of the other conscious material that's coming in from the self, coming in from outside of it. It like blocks it off. It's like this, like, imagine a little kid in the corner of a room throwing a tantrum, and he's like punching things that are coming towards him because he thinks he's right and he knows he's right, and he's battling out against people, and you can't get close to him. That's what your ego's doing when it's very small and limited. It's stopping any ideas coming in, and it's stopping any integration coming in. It just wants to survive. It wants to keep what it is, and it thinks it's right. So it's got a self-protection mechanism, because for that, if it gets proved wrong, it feels like death for the ego. So what you want to do is that little ball, that little oval that resides within the middle, your ego, you want to be able to build that to be softer and to grow larger. And the larger it grows, the more awareness, the more incorporated it is within the rest of your psyche. So the parts of your minds that maybe are dark, and the parts of your mind that are depressed and anxious, instead of your ego just being this small limited ball that's fighting against everything, it can actually grow and bring the other stuff inwards, and it can integrate things, and your ego can be more vast and open. It's the contradiction between being very limited and very survival, and being growth orientated and abundant. The more like growth and abundant you are, and a sense of abundance you have, the more larger you're going to be, the more things are going to expand outwards. But when your ego's in a very survival mode, when it's like just trying to protect its own ideas and its own identity, it's inwards, it's limited, it's closed in. And if you look at like a body language, for example, if you look at someone that's got their shoulders hunched over and their head down, and they're scared of the world, they're inwards, they have less energy, they look fragile, they look like they're not taking things in. And then look at a confident person, someone who has the shoulders back and is very open to the world, their chest out, their heart on show. That's the difference between having a large ego awareness and a small limited ego awareness. You want to be open and incorporated, and the more open you can be, the more you can bring in from the outside. So anything that is repressed, you can bring it inwards, you can bring it into the ego awareness, and then you can act from a place of knowledge and awareness instead of pure limitation and suppression. And I think that's really important. It's kind of like I like using the example of light. So say if you're in a really dark room, say if you was to go in this massive cellar now, right, and all I gave you was a candle. You have this one candle, and you're in the corner of this cellar, and you light this candle, and now you can just see a little bit in front of you. That candle is your ego. That candle, that light is your consciousness. That's all you're aware of. And you can move it around in this massive cellar, but you can't really see what's going on. And then all of a sudden, you figure out how to make this light and this flame bigger, and then you can see more of the outside, and you realize that the more steps you take into the darkness, you find another candle. So you bring the other candle there. Now you've got two flames, and they get louder, and you're exploring this dark cellar. And the more parts you walk in, the more parts you explore, the more light you find, and the room starts lighting up, and the room starts lighting up. And that example of finding more candles, finding more light to light up the room, is perfectly illustrated within how you would deal with the mind. You start off with a small light, you start off with this small awareness, and through a process of actually traversing the darkness, through going into the shadow, through going through the things that you find scary and anxious and afraid, you build this bigger light, and you get more of a light, and you become more aware of the cellar, you become more aware of the candles that are lying around. And I find that very interesting, that illustration, right? How I said that you have this one candle, and the more you step into darkness, the more light you find. So then the less darkness there is. And your mind and your life works in exactly the same way. The more courageous steps you take into the darkness, the more you're willing to go into the abyss of your depression, the abyss of your anxiety, the more you're willing to sink into what you need to sink into, the more light you're going to find, and the more you're going to light up your awareness and your consciousness of the patterns of your mind and the things that are holding you back. But it really is a process of, you just have to take the step. You don't know what's in front of you. You don't know what you're going to find or how it's going to feel. You don't know if you're going to slip. You don't know if you're going to run into something dangerous, but you have to take the first step. And as you take that first step, and you take another one, and you work your way around. Eventually, you'll come across a source of light, and that source of light, used in coupled with your source of light now, will then light up more of the room, and it'll give you more ideas of where you are, and more courage and more awareness, and you can take more steps. And the more light you recruit, the more steps you can take into darkness, and the less darkness is going to be, because you're building up more light. And that's the process of humans being enlightened for me. That's the way, enlightened. Like, even I just thought of that now. Enlightened. What is it? Enlight. You're creating more light, and you're becoming aware of the darkness and bringing in more light into your life. And I think that's the whole goal for us, is to bring more light into our life. Is to bring light is translated to awareness in this metaphor that I'm using. And yeah, the more I think about my life, the more when I have been willing to go into the darkness, when I've been willing to accept the things I didn't want to accept and look at the things I didn't want to look at, only good comes out of it. And there's this idea of, I've in this podcast, I've painted out shadow work as a very negative thing, like dealing with the negative parts of your mind. But there is also this idea of the golden shadow. And it's what I said before about how you could be in a family that doesn't like people who achieve. Like, you could be in a very messy household, and if you cleaned your room, you'd get your parents coming across going, "Oh, what are you cleaning your room for?" Or you'd get like people, say for example, here's a good example. Say if you go on self-improvement and you're with your current friends who like to party, who like to do self-destructive habits, and then you stop partaking in them self-destructive habits, say you start actually going to the gym and eating clean, you'll get very snarky comments against people. Like, people will give you snarky comments, and they'll go, "Oh, why do you think you're so good now? Why are you going to the gym? Oh, look at you." They'll say all these things, and that will feel very negative for you, and it will feel extremely alienating. And if you listen to that, then you stop doing the things, you stop doing the higher conscious activities that are actually progressing you forward, because in your mind, your ego's ideal. It's too afraid not to fit in. So then you suppress it into your mind. So then you're actually suppressing good characteristics. You're suppressing good attributes about yourself in your mind. So you can see how shadow work has got an evil side, and it's also got a good side. It's called the dark shadow and the golden shadow. So it's not, by doing shadow work, you're not just releasing and incorporating the evil parts of your shadow into your psyche, into your soul. You're also bringing down the positive attributes from the golden shadow and bringing that into your awareness. So now you have the energy of good and bad to use both at your will. Like, you're actually unlocking attributes about yourself that are good by going into shadow work as well. And when people do shadow work, they often find that they can instantly be a completely different person with loads of confidence. You can have someone who's very anxious, and when they're willing to do the shadow work and sit in with their anxiety and realize where it's coming from and what their projections are, why is this like being a problem for me? What is my ego's ideal? When they do all this work and deconstruct it, then this new level of confidence emerges, and they're a really confident person. And it's like they've unlocked the golden shadow by also coming into the dark shadow. Very interesting stuff. The golden shadow is a bit more of like a complex thing, because it's quite hard to wrap your head around how you can like actually suppress positive attributes about yourself. But if it doesn't fit in with your environment, remember, like, the ego is a very it's a very tricky, illusionary idea. It's built off survival, right? It wants to survive. It's like an identity, and anything that has an identity, anything that is a being, wants to survive. And so it does what it needs to do to survive. So it could be getting abused, it could be getting neglected, it could be really depressed, really angry, but it finds that it's surviving, and the idea of who it is, this mental conception of who it is, keeps getting reaffirmed by the external environment. And then it gets this sense of gratitude, and this sense of like, not gratitude, this sense of, okay, I'm alive, I'm working, the world's mapping who I think I am. So it doesn't matter if it feels negative towards you. It's like, I'm alive, I'm getting proof that I'm right, I'm getting attention, I'm getting whatever this is. And so it wants to continue to live out its own narratives, because for that it shows survival. And so anything that is good that goes against the ego's ideas is still going to get conflicted away. It's still going to get pushed away, because for the ego to say that if it has this idea of I'm an insecure, I'm an anxious person who has to hide away from the world and I'm scared of the world, but this has kept me protected and kept me safe, and these ideas get reinforced, but then all of a sudden people are telling me to be confident and that I'm actually a confident person and that I can be confident, and this feeling of confidence arises into me. All of a sudden it's this ego's like, oh no, this isn't me, what is it doing? And I'll push it away, I'll suppress it again, because I'm going to go back to being anxious, because this is what I know, this is what I'm comfortable with, this is who I am. And so the ego just wants to be right, it doesn't want what's good for you. And so in a way, like maybe the shadow, maybe the parts of our psyche that we're not aware of are more divine than our ego. Maybe our ego is actually, maybe our ego is evil. When I said it wasn't evil before, maybe it can be the evil in its own pursuit of its own survival, because it doesn't always respect the greatest sense of self. It just wants to survive. Well, maybe that's for another time, I could talk about that, but I think that's me done, boys, because my voice is really sore. I'm really struggling today. I feel like I sound like a 90-year-old woman who's been smoking ciggies for about 75 years. But yeah, I appreciate everyone listening. Hopefully it's not unlistenable with my voice. And yeah, I really enjoy doing the podcast as always. That was another off-cuff podcast about shadow work. All I'm doing at the moment is reading a lot of psychological material, and then just to clarify my own ideas and my own knowledge, and to clarify the things, I'm kind of just like talking in the podcast about them, as a kind of my own understanding of ideas. I think it really helps. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, people. If you got any requests, if you want a guest on, if you want me to talk about a certain subject, just let me know, and I'm more than happy to do that. But I appreciate you all as always. I really do appreciate the people that listen to the show. I apologise for not being as consistent, because I don't really understand how people could listen to me for so long. From my point of view, it doesn't feel like I have a lot of knowledge. Although I did say before that I do think I know things. When I think about a podcast, it's like I feel very sometimes self-aware that I'm not providing you with the information and respecting your time properly. But I hope I am, and I hope you get a lot from this. And maybe, I don't know how much this podcast helps people, because I have had messages of people saying like, I've really helped change their life, which is it is an incredible feeling. But yeah, it does put this pressure and responsibility on me, and I think sometimes I can run away from that. But it's something this year I want to embrace and I want to take on. That like I've done a lot of this work, I've still got so much work to do, but I do feel this sense of responsibility. It's like I can help people in like maybe who haven't gone down this path yet, and then people could help me. But I feel this responsibility to share. So yeah, enough of me waffling about my own inner feelings. I'm going to end the podcast here. So thank you very much for listening, people, and I'll see you all in the next episode.